Welcome to the Jet Set Dynasty Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Jet Set Dynasty Podcast. I am your host, as always, Jordon Nutter. You can find me on Twitter at DynastyNut. And today I am joined by Bryan Stein, who you can find on Twitter at FootballBry15. Bryan, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
So, Bryan, before we get started, I just wanted to share with you a little personal story that happened to me in the past couple days. So I was working at my job. I shall withhold where I work because I don't want to get fired. Even though I would love that, but I think it's just best for, company brands that I do not mention anybody that I work for. So I was at my job. I work in retail, and I was out on the sales floor organizing shelves, and this 10-year-old boy, pretty chubby 10-year-old boy, was in there with, I'd say, his 8 or 9-year-old brother. But anyway, as I'm standing there doing my job, I hear this kid talking to his little brother about his fantasy football team.
Oh my god.
And of course, anytime I hear my fantasy team, my ears perk up and I listen in and I tune in like a bat because I want to hear what's going on. So the kid starts listing off his team, and he's reading it by lineup. So he goes quarterback, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Things that I keyed in on, I heard running back, Ezekiel Elliott. If you listen to our first podcast, you know how I feel about drafting Ezekiel Elliott.
Not good, right?
Not good. No. Let somebody else take that massive risk. But anyway, I can think, he's young. Ezekiel Elliott's all over the place. He has like one of the most bought jerseys already in the NFL. Okay, you're young. I'll let you make your mistakes so you can learn on your own. Then he keeps on reading down. And at one point, he says, the Seattle Seahawks defense. So I stop what I'm doing for a second, and I turn towards the kid, and I just ask him, like, hey, do you mind if I ask, when'd you draft the Seattle Seahawks defense? He looks at me dead in the eye. He's like, second round, obviously.
No, he didn't.
I swear to God, Bryan, this kid looked me dead in the eye, straight-faced, and said, second round.
The kid's 10 years old, though. Does he even really understand what numbers are?
For the fact, I don't know that he was 10 years old. He couldn't have been older than 12, but right in that range.
Right.
But he still looked at me and said, second round. And I started laughing. So I said, kid, that's amateur stuff. Does that make me an awful adult? So I was trying to explain to him that what you need to do is early rounds pick good players and then wait to get defenses towards the end. So I explained this to him in the best way that I possibly could, because I was thinking, pandering to a younger audience is a little bit tougher. He looks at me and he says, but then I might not get the Seahawks defense. But his whole thought process was that they're the best defense. I want to get the best defense, right? I said, no, it doesn't, because there is very little difference between the best defense and the 12th defense.
Especially in week-to-week play.
So he's still walking around the store. I go back to doing my job, utterly disappointed that I have failed to inspire the youth of the world. He said, well, okay, I'm going to do another draft. I think he was just using one of the the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard, or maybe Fantasy Football Calculator has a quick mock draft tool. Because he had another mock draft done in minutes. And he comes up to me, he said, okay, I got the Seahawks defense in the third round. Is that better?
And you said yes.
I said, yeah, that is a little bit better. Feel awful because I'm trying to critique this 10-year-old who just really wants to have fun.
The only thing I have to say to add to that story is I just hope that you referred him to our website, superfantasybros.com, and invited him to look at our rankings.
I did not. Because I feel like it's just a little bit weird if I'm trying to give this kid fantasy advice. Then I whip out a business card and hand it to him with all my contact information on it. I couldn't do it.
His parents call you the next day. What are you doing talking to my son?
Take some damn responsibility for yourself as a parent. What is wrong with you?
He drafted the Seahawks defense in the second round. The mother quivers on the other side of the phone. Oh, my stars.
A defense in the second round? Why does he just go and draft Matt Forte first overall? Since we're just throwing away fantasy football picks. So next time you're in a mock draft room and somebody picks the Seahawks defense in the second round, instead of getting pissed and typing profanities into the ESPN chat section, just remember it's probably a 10-year-old kid and you're probably an asshole.
Good words of wisdom.
Now let's talk about the news around the NFL. I said on Monday that this was going to be a daily podcast, and it did not even take me one day to break that promise. Because Madden 17 came out and I committed way too much time to playing over the first couple of days. Brian did as well.
It's addicting, man.
I just feel bad. Every year I drop $60 on Madden, even though I know there's better ways for me to spend that money. But yet, year after year, I keep on repeatedly buying a slightly altered version of the same game for full price.
We talked about this earlier off the podcast, off the recording set here. I loved how, when you installed it, the first thing it said was, would you like to update the commentary? It's just got to throw it in our face because it knows, the EA Sports knows that one thing that we've been complaining about as Madden buyers for the past umpteen years is that the commentary hasn't changed in probably, 5 years realistically?
Yes, I am so tired of Chris Collinsworth at this point. Anytime that there's an NFL game with Chris Collinsworth commentating, I usually have to mute the TV because I've just heard his voice for so long in Madden. I feel like at this point, I'm going to go to hell, and the devil is going to sound like Chris Collinsworth.
The devil may be Chris Collinsworth.
The devil may be Chris Collinsworth. But anyway, we wasted too much time on Madden, so here we are. We're recording this Wednesday night, August 24th, and we're just going to go over some of the news around the NFL and give our personal fantasy spins to it. So let's kick it off with the Miami Dolphins backfield. Kenyon Drake is now apparently behind Isaiah Pead in Miami. Wow. It's incredible to me that the Dolphins' third-round pick cannot even beat Isaiah Pead on the depth chart.
I didn't know Isaiah Pead was still in the league.
I agree. Until this blurb popped up, I assumed Isaiah Pead had retired. So obviously, Kenyon Drake is firmly off the redraft radar, barring an Arian Foster injury, which is within the realm of possibility, admittedly. Kenyon Drake carries no value whatsoever, and even if Foster does go down, I think he has very limited PPR value.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't like him coming out of college. I didn't see enough of him. I don't think he can be a quality pass blocker, which if you're going to be a receiving back or a third down back, you've got to be able to pass block.
I don't know if the Dolphins drafted him higher up thinking that he just kind of lost opportunity because he's been buried behind Derrick Henry, who is absolutely a phenomenal college talent, and they thought, we'll give him the opportunity and he'll step up. But he's behind Isaiah Pead. What more is there to say about this?
Isaiah Pead is like the Division III version of Derrick Henry.
So this just shows that if you do your dynasty rookie rankings based off where NFL teams draft these players, you're probably going to end up disappointed. Kenyon Drake should not have been a third-round pick. Kenyon Drake shouldn't have been drafted, I think, until the 6th or 7th round.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he went before running backs like Kenneth Dixon and Devontae Booker, it's just head-scratching. What were they thinking? What was their thought process to signing this guy?
If they really wanted somebody who could catch passes, they definitely should have drafted Kenneth Dixon. You can pull out some games tape. It's clear that Kenneth Dixon is a tremendous receiver out of the backfield.
They definitely are. There's a difference between rookie struggles and just plain stupidity and overdrafting. I mean, every rookie is going to struggle, but when you're this far in camp and you haven't shown any flashes, that's a cause for concern. That's a red flag. You've been in this offense, you've been studying the playbook, or you should have been for 3-4 months now. You should be able to make some plays.
I mean, he runs fast at 4.45. That's a good speed score. Average agility, average burst. Only did 10 bench presses, so he's pretty weak. But he's not even a great athlete. 104.4 SparkX score. That's 22nd percentile. His best comparable player is Alphonso Smith.
Yeah, I mean, and then when you look at Kenneth Dixon's player profile here, I mean, he was in the 77th percentile in burst score. The rest of them, he's right about average. His bench press was 18, which is better than Kenyon Drake's was. His college dominator rating was in the 90th percentile.
I didn't even read Kenyon Drake's college dominator because we all know it's one of the worst ones. Once again, behind Derrick Henry.
As I'm looking down at his best comparable, I chuckle because his best comparable is Jay Ajayi, which I don't necessarily agree with. I hated Jay Ajayi coming out of college, and I love Kenneth Dixon coming out of college.
Best comparable as athletes doesn't mean they play the game the same way. Jay Ajayi is a bad receiver.
Awful receiver.
Absolutely terrible receiver. He was apparently working on it. I'm doing air quotes you can't see through the audio podcast. He was apparently working on it all off season, and apparently they still didn't trust him whatsoever.
I mean, you saw in that preseason game, it was a catchable ball he had, and he tipped it right into the defender's arms.
Moving on.
Josh Doctson is expected to be ready for week 1. Everybody, I think, should be surprised by this. He hasn't played in training camp whatsoever. They've already ruled him out for week 3 and week 4 of the preseason, but claim he's going to be ready for week 1. Not really buying it. Don't think Doctson's really going to do anything that warrant a redraft pick. I could see a scenario where he comes on the second half of the season, but he's still going to be behind, I think, both Jordan Reed and Deshaun Jackson on the target totem pole at the very least, possibly even behind Pierre Garçon and Chris Thompson. But if you have him in Dynasty, it's nice. It's going to be nice to see that he's actually on the field getting the reps that he needs to. Josh Doctson was my favorite wide receiver in this class, so I'm certainly pumped up, but I'm not expecting anything for this season.
Josh Doctson was my second favorite receiver, just purely by my tape evaluations. Leonte Carroo was actually my favorite receiver, but Josh Doctson did everything right. He was good at high pointing the ball. He really went after it. He ran a lot of different routes. Definitely don't draft him. Don't waste your pick in a redraft league, but don't panic and don't sell him off for cheap.
A lot of people thought that the Doctson pick would mean either Garçon or Jackson was heading for free agency. Clearly that didn't happen because Doctson hasn't been healthy at all, but clearly it's not going to happen before the start of the regular season, no matter what. Once again, he hasn't practiced at all. If you are expecting some production from Josh Doctson this season, you shouldn't. You should expect nothing and then be pleasantly surprised if he ends up putting up quality numbers in the second half. So on to a little hometown news. As you know, this podcast is based out of the Pittsburgh area, and it's been a very interesting saga this offseason for the Steelers' number 3 wideout job. Everybody has been predicting that it's been Sammy Coates since the Martavis Bryant suspension. Obviously, with the Bryant suspension, Marcus Wheaton moves up to the number 2 position. He has now said that he's going to bounce outside, which leaves open the slot role. Many people have assumed that Sammy Coates will fill the role, being a third-round draft pick last year. But it seems that Sammy Coates is not going to be the number 3 receiver. It's going to be an undrafted free agent named Eli Rogers.
And this is certainly a surprise. I mean, Sammy Coates has the draft pedigree.
I think anybody that knew Sammy Coates coming into the draft should know that he was a very raw player. Even at Auburn, he just didn't have the mechanics of an NFL receiver. Personally, I never thought that he was going to be ready to fill this position coming into the season. But if you pull up Eli Rogers' player profile, there's not a whole lot to look at that's interesting, except for the fact that he's a very agile player with a 10.81 agility score, 90th percentile. He had an 18.7 breakout age. That is 95th percentile. Everything else is in the bottom 25th percentile. Slot receivers can overcome a lot of these physical drawbacks. Just look at Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, Jarvis Landry is not a special athlete at all, but he knows how to get it done. The key thing that you said there, looking at that player profile, is his agility. You've got to be able to make quick moves if you're a slot wide receiver. You've got to be able to dive, dip, duck, dive, and dodge away from linebackers and D linemen that you might be squeaking around.
If you pull up the Jarvis Landry player profiler page, it's even less inspiring than Eli Rogers. The only thing to really write home about on Jarvis Landry's page is his college dominator rating, 40%. That's 77th percentile, and his yards per reception was 15.5. But Ben Roethlisberger has said that he likes Eli Rogers. So I think that Eli Rogers is somebody that you definitely need to look out for.
The one thing that